In 1970, something broke in the future. Peter Thiel thinks we never really fixed it. If he is right, every portfolio, every pension, every long-term plan is built on a lie. Because a world that quietly stalls while pretending to grow does not correct gently. It snaps. Hard. And the people who do not see it coming are the collateral. You are not here to be collateral. This is Money Stories. This episode from Ross Douthat's channel matters because Thiel is not just another billionaire. He is the man who called the end of the future before it was fashionable, then bet on Trump, AI, and decline itself. In a world of slowing growth and rising populism, his framework is a live-fire exercise in how stagnation rewires markets and power. So what does he claim? That from 1750 to 1970, the West rode a true technological supercycle. Then, the real economy hit molasses.
And basically the argument in that essay was that the dynamic, fast-paced, ever-changing modern world was just not nearly as dynamic as people thought.
Thiel does not retreat from that claim in 2025. He doubles down. He tells Ross Douthat that from 1750 to 1970, ships, railroads, cars, planes all kept getting faster, climaxing with Apollo and the Concorde. Then the curve flattened. Outside the world of bits, the velocity of change broke. Yes, we got software, internet, mobile, crypto, AI. He calls that the world of bits. He even concedes the AI revolution is pretty big. But he poses the real question. Is that enough to escape a generalized stagnation in the physical world that actually sets living standards? Here is the twist. He says late modernity is so hyper-specialized that we cannot even tell if we are stuck. Physics is guarded by string theorists. Biotech by cancer researchers. Quantum computing by its own priesthood. Each vertical grades itself. Each demands more capital for marginal progress. That opacity itself is a red flag. So he asks the investor's question, what hard numbers would prove we are in a true takeoff, not just a hype cycle? Is it GDP growth? Productivity? Some composite index of real-world change that would force even the skeptics to admit the future restarted? Thiel answers like a portfolio manager of civilization. First metric, your living standards versus your parents at the same age. If a 30-year-old millennial cannot outpace their boomer parents at 30, the growth engine is misfiring. Second metric, the rate and return of scientific breakthroughs. How much discovery per dollar, per PhD, per lab? He argues science and academia now show classic diminishing returns. More grants, more bodies, more prestige games, less breakthrough. That is when institutions turn Malthusian and sociopathic. In the 1970s, the story flips. Nuclear dread, ecological doom. A new creed whispers that more growth means apocalypse, not abundance. So the culture hits the brakes and calls it virtue. But if you stop finding a way back to the future, Thiel says, the system itself unravels. He redefines the middle class in one brutal line. Not income, not job title, expectation. The middle class is the people who expect their kids to do better than themselves. Kill that expectation, and you kill the social contract. What replaces it? Static feudalism. Or something even stranger, a society where mobility is a myth and the first 200 years of the American experiment look like an anomaly, not a model. That is the real downside of stagnation. Not boredom, regime change. So what happens when ordinary people finally notice the ladder is gone? Thiel's answer is blunt. They revolt. Or the institutions simply stop working because every major system was built on one assumption. Growth, budgets, entitlements, debt markets, all priced on tomorrow being bigger than today. Reagan runs consumer capitalism. Borrow, spend, juice demand. Obama runs low-tax socialism. Generous state, but without the confiscatory bill. Both are oxymorons. Both only function if the pie keeps expanding. Without growth, that equilibrium snaps. Either taxes spike or benefits die. There is no stable middle. Greta Thunberg becomes a symbol, not just of climate concern, of a full anti-growth settlement, environmentalist, quasi-authoritarian, a world where the answer to every problem is shrink. Ross Douthat looks at that shrink world and sees something darker. In Stagnation, he says, elites start craving a crisis. They want a 9/11 style jolt so they can radically redirect society out of decadence. They lean into danger, war, government overhauls. Thiel does not flinch. He just says it. We should take a lot more risk. Across many verticals, he picks biotech, dementia, Alzheimer's. Then he drops the bomb. Zero progress in 40 to 50 years. Locked into one story, beta amyloid, a stupid racket where insiders reinforce each other and nothing fundamental changes. So what does real risk look like in medicine? Thiel'S answer is brutal. If you have a fatal disease, you should be allowed to swing for the fences. Laissez-faire paternalism. Culturally, he wants a reset. Back to early modernity, Francis Bacon, Condorcet. A world where the explicit project of science is to cure disease, push radical life extension, even chase immortality itself. So when Thiel says Christianity was competitive, he means it set the bar. Physical resurrection. If science wanted to displace that, it had to promise the same thing. Literal victory over death, not metaphor. Balance sheet. At PayPal in 1999, they actually tried to buy that promise. Luke Nozick, the true believer futurist, drags the whole company to an Alcor freezing party. Full body package, or the discount option, just the head, the dot matrix printer jams. The immortality contracts do not print. Thiel looks back and calls it stagnation in disguise. The tech was already stuck. He also calls it a generational high-water mark. Fringe boomer narcissism.
No one who's a millennial believes that anymore.
Ross Douthat spots where the faith migrated. Some people now pin their Transcendence trade on AI. Upload the mind, fuse with the machine. A different route to immortality, growing right alongside Thiel's other big experiment. His attempt to turn the stagnation thesis into a political trade. Thiel stops fantasizing about seasteads and starts doing something far more dangerous. He treats politics like a cap table. Trump, a handful of Senate bets, including a future vice president. In Ross Douthat's phrase, he becomes a kind of venture capitalist for politics, backing disruptive agents to redirect the Titanic from the iceberg, and at minimum, force a real conversation about American decline.
In retrospect, this was a preposterous fantasy.
Why did he rate Trump at coin flip odds? Because the problems were deep and the stagnation was frustrating. Voters were angry, elites were defensive, no one was ready to talk about lost greatness as a structural fact. Did his political VC trade pay anything? He points to a shift in the Overton window at the very top. In 2012, 2013, 2014, he debates Eric Schmidt, Mark Andreessen, Jeff Bezos. Thiel is on the there's a stagnation problem side. They are on everything's going great. Today, he says all three have updated and adjusted. Spend hundreds of millions, go completely woke. Get hated by everyone. At some point, even the most insulated founder has to say it. Okay, maybe this isn't working.
It's still by far the best option we have. I don't think, I don't know, is Harvard going to cure dementia by just puttering along, doing the same thing that hasn't worked for 50 years?
That line is there's hell. Thiel is not selling Trumpism as salvation. He is saying the establishment is so stagnant that disruption itself becomes the growth trade. Critics say populists don't want to spend money on science. Thiel flips the question. How well is the science machine actually working? He points back to the New Dealers who pushed science hard, scaled it, and could actually run a Manhattan Project. Today, an Einstein letter gets lost in the mailroom, and a moonshot is code for never. So what is populism good for? First, demolition. Deregulate nuclear. Strip fake moonshots. Clear the field. Then comes construction. New reactors. Better designs. Maybe fusion.
Then in some ways,
Because everyone hates you and associates you with Trump? Like, how is it toxic for you personally?
He stops funding politicians. Cold. Not because politics stopped mattering, because it matters too much. In his words, incredibly important and incredibly toxic. Zero sum. Everyone who touches it gets burned. Why walk away from the arena that decides the rules of the future? Because in a zero-sum world, every political bet creates enemies, hardens narratives, locks you into the Trump box. The stakes feel really, really high. The upside? Capped. The downside? Permanent. So where do you go when politics is necessary for progress, but poisonous to touch? You start looking for an exit from the game itself. Peter Thiel tells Musk in 2024, half a joking, half serious, if Trump loses, I want to just leave the country. Musk fires back, there's nowhere to go. Thiel goes home, realizes 2 hours later what that really means. 2024. The year Elon stopped treating Mars as an exit.
2024 is the year where Elon stopped believing in Mars, not as a silly science tech project, but as a political project.
Mars was supposed to be a new society, the Heinlein fantasy, not a lab. Demis Hassabis tells him, "My AI will be able to follow you to Mars." Woke AI. Socialist US government. They do not stay on Earth. They follow the capital stack wherever it goes.
My stupid answers, it's more than a nothing burger, and it's less than the total transformation of our society.
So Thiel pegs AI as late 1990s, internet scale. Think, maybe 1% extra GDP growth a year? For a decade or so. Enough to mint great firms, not enough to reboot civilization. He'd rather fund Mars shots and dementia cures. He does not buy the superintelligence cascade fantasy. Silicon Valley worships IQ. Thiel says the bottleneck is culture, not brains. We already waste smart people. We punish heterodox minds. Douthat pushes the nightmare. AI as a global Netflix algorithm, infinite okay ideas, mass layoffs, zero real innovation. Thiel concedes. Quite possible. But he still hits the buy button, because the counterfactual is not some lost technoph. It is almost total stagnation. Inside that stagnating world, Douthat points to a different escape hatch. The AI priesthood that treats code as a ladder out of flesh, talking about successor species, mind-machine mergers, even a machine god, then needles Thiel on the core equity question of the species itself. Does he actually want common stock humanity to endure?
You're hesitating.
Yeah, well,
Thiel defines transhumanism as turning the natural body into an immortal one, then slams today's trans moves as so pathetically little, saying real transformation would hit heart, mind, whole body, and that Orthodox Christianity's critique is even harsher. It says, transhumanism itself is too small. It forgets the soul. From a Christian balance sheet, his verdict on the AI immortalists is brutal. They are not morally or spiritually ambitious enough, and even on the physical side, their machine god is just a thin software wrapper on the same old mortality. Peter pivots from eternity to something more embarrassing. Our elites, he says, are brilliant at building tech and terrible at asking what it means. Instead of asking how AI hits GDP, debt service, or the dollar's reserve status, they argue about IQ ELO scores and the exact definition of AGI. He tells a story. Elon predicts 1 billion humanoid robots in the US in 10 years. Peter shoots back, then the budget deficit is irrelevant. The real missing layer? How an AI arms race reshapes China's timing on Taiwan. Does accelerating AI deter Beijing because it is already lost, or force a now or never strike? Thiel takes that Taiwan timing question and zooms out. Nuclear war, climate disaster, bioweapons, AI, the whole existential risk vocabulary. He says the default political solution that elites reach for is simple. One world governance. A United Nations with teeth that controls nukes. Global compute governance that logs every keystroke to police AI. The atheist slogan called it one world or none. Christianity framed it as Antichrist or Armageddon.
But I think we have an answer to this plot hole. The way the Antichrist would take over the world is you talk about Armageddon nonstop. You talk about existential risk nonstop.
He says the old Antichrist novels had a glitch. How does one man actually take over the planet? In a risk-obsessed age, the power move is different. You terrify the world with Armageddon scenarios, then demand to stop science and regulate everything. Today, the winning archetype looks more like Greta Thunberg, not building the machine, pulling the plug. Ross Douthat reframes it. The modern Antichrist is not a wizard of technology. It is the figure who weaponizes fear of Skynet, Terminator, nuclear Armageddon. Who promises safety by freezing the frontier and locking in universal stagnation? Thiel agrees. Douthat adds one crucial precondition. To get a peace and safety dictator, you first need a burst of real progress. Something like powerful AI that solves the old totalitarian knowledge problem, lets central planners actually see everything. The sequence is brutal. Acceleration. A near apocalypse that feels tangible. Then a savior who tames it and uses that same infrastructure to enforce permanent, technologically assisted stagnation.
But I think environmentalism's pretty powerful. You know, I don't know if it's absolutely powerful enough to create a one world totalitarian state, but man, it is.
If you want to see what a pro-stagnation creed looks like in practice, you do not start with AI. You start with nuclear. Thiel calls environmentalism the only thing people still believe in Europe, the only real future on offer. Green rules, green parties, green vetoes, On energy, on industry, on growth itself. How did we get there? Follow the timeline. Baconian science races from the lab to Los Alamos. Splits the atom. Ends World War II. Then the mood flips. Nuclear terror. Fallout nightmares. The same toolkit that could have powered cities gets spiritually quarantined. So when Europe later embraces green, it is not just about cleaner air. It is a theology of limits. A story that says the safest level of nuclear is zero, the safest level of growth is flat, the noblest ambition is not to change the planet at all. You see the pattern now. First nuclear, then broader tech, fear of runaway progress becomes the master narrative that justifies permanent slowdown. Ross Douthat, the Catholic columnist playing prosecuting attorney, cuts in. We are not under the Antichrist, he says. We are just stagnant. If a future Antichrist weaponizes fear of tech, he asks, what tools would that figure reach for? Surveillance grids, military AI, data platforms that see everything. In other words, the exact Palantir-style infrastructure Thiel has funded. The irony is brutal. The man warning about a technocratic Antichrist might be supplying the operating system. Thiel does not flinch. Is it really so absurd, he asks, to say the world has already submitted, for 50 years, to a peace and safety regime?
Is this so preposterous, what I've just told you, as a broad account of the stagnation, that the entire world has submitted for 50 years to peace and safetyism?
He cites 1 Thessalonians 5-3. The slogan of the Antichrist is peace and safety. Then he names the secular priesthood, the FDA, whose standards radiate outward until drug innovation everywhere orbits Washington, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, whose caution effectively governs reactors from Berlin to Buenos Aires. So why did growth stall? One story says we ran out of ideas. Thiel gives you another. Something cultural happened. Innovation was no longer allowed. Human beings became more docile. Or a top-down machinery of government retooled itself into a global stagnation engine. Nuclear was supposed to power the 21st century. Instead, it was off-ramped worldwide, not by lack of physics, by a system that chose peace and safety over dynamism and risk. Thiel refuses the ultimate stagnation trade. He looks at this soft antichrist of screens and lectures and says there is still room for human freedom and human choice. History is not a closed-end fund. It is not absolutely predetermined one way or another. That matters for capital. Because if the future is not scripted, then optionality has real value. Human agency is the hidden call option. The market keeps mispricing.
And the Christian view is anti-Calvinist. God is not behind history. God is not causing everything.
Thiel rejects that strategy outright. Determinism is a sell signal. Freedom is the activist play. You do not hedge against the Antichrist of stagnation. You short it. Douthat, the apocalyptic realist, pushes one step further. If you use that freedom to resist this stagnationist Antichrist, you should expect to win. Thiel signs off on that. We can agree on that. A long, leveraged bet on a more dynamic, hopeful future that humans still choose. Here is the uncomfortable truth. We just walked through a world where progress stalled, politics turned into a toxic SPAC for power, environmentalism became a degrowth religion, and AI emerged as the only real boom in a stagnant market for the future. Thiel's core claim is simple. Since 1970, the West stopped compounding its technological returns in the physical world. We kept the spreadsheets, we lost the rockets. Why does that matter for money? Because every balance sheet you care about is priced on growth. Middle-class security, government budgets, corporate earnings, asset valuations, all of it assumes tomorrow is bigger than today. If the future is flat, the math breaks. Quietly at first. Then, all at once, we saw how Dementia and Biotech became a case study in regulatory paralysis, how Mars stopped being an exit strategy, how AI became the last growth engine standing, a 1990s-style internet boom in a 1970s-style stagnation. Not salvation, just the only game in town. We also saw the darker trade, the temptation to freeze technology in the name of peace and safety, a soft world government of regulators, ESG committees, and existential risk clerics who promise safety by killing the upside. The Antichrist not as a sci-fi supervillain. As a compliance regime, here is my read. The real risk is not runaway AI. It is a world that uses AI to optimize stagnation. Infinite content. Zero courage. Screens forever. Greta forever. No new nuclear. No new cities. No new frontier. Thiel's final move is the most radical. He refuses to treat this as fate. He insists on agency, on the idea that humans can still choose a different curve, that if you actually fight the stagnation trade, you should expect to win. So what do you remember when this video ends? Remember that stagnation is not neutral. It is a position. It is a bet against your children. And every investment decision you make is a vote on that curve. This is Money Stories. If you want more deep dives into the hidden balance sheet of the future, hit like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments, are you betting on stagnation or are you still long the future?